Part 5. The military's interest in humanity's newfound indestructibility grew rapidly as reports of superhuman feats spread across the country. It didn't take long for recruiters to realize the potential of soldiers who couldn't be hurt. In training facilities and government offices, discussions turned into plans, and plans turned into action. The idea of an army made up of nearly invincible individuals was too tempting to ignore. In Texas, Ryan Dawson found himself at the center of this attention. As a college football star known for his strength and endurance, he had always attracted scouts looking for talent. But now, it wasn't just sports teams knocking on his door, it was the military. Ryan received letters, emails, and even personal visits from recruiters eager to convince him to enlist. They promised scholarships, signing bonuses, and opportunities to serve his country in ways no one else could. At first, Ryan was flattered. He loved the idea of being part of something bigger than himself, especially if it meant using his abilities to protect others. But as he learned more about what the military wanted, doubts began creeping in. Recruiters painted a glamorous picture of heroism and adventure, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were glossing over important details. What exactly would they expect him to do? Would he still have a choice in how his life unfolded, or would he become a pawn in someone else's game? His parents noticed his hesitation. "You don't have to decide right away," his father told him one evening over dinner. "Take your time. Think about what's best for you." Ryan nodded, though he wasn't sure what best even meant anymore. On one hand, the idea of serving his country appealed to him. On the other hand, he worried about losing control of his own future. The thought of being used as a weapon, not just metaphorically, but literally, made him uneasy. Meanwhile, whispers emerged about secret programs designed to train and weaponize indestructible individuals. These rumors spread quietly, passed along by word of mouth and online forums. In Nevada, Derek Collins heard about them during his investigation into the hidden facility. Sources claimed that young recruits were being taken to remote locations and subjected to rigorous, sometimes dangerous experiments. The goal, according to insiders, was to harness their resilience and turn it into a tool for national defense. Derek knew he had to dig deeper. If these programs existed, the public deserved to know. But getting information wasn't easy. People involved were careful to cover their tracks, and those who spoke out risked retaliation. Still, Derek pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Back in Ohio, Alex Carter and Dr. Karen Lewis continued their work in the lab. Though they couldn't ignore the growing militarization of their discovery, news stories about recruitment drives and classified projects weighed heavily on them. "We didn't sign up for this," Alex muttered one night as he reviewed data under the fluorescent lights. "This was supposed to be about science, not war." Dr. Lewis sighed, rubbing her temples. "I know. But once something like this gets out, we lose control of how it's used. All we can do is keep trying to understand it and hope the right people are making decisions." Their concerns weren't unfounded. Across the country, ethical debates raged about the use of indestructible humans in combat. Some argued that it was a logical step forward, a way to minimize casualties on the battlefield. Others saw it as exploitation, warning that turning young people into weapons could have devastating consequences. Parents of teenagers targeted by recruiters joined forces with activists to demand transparency and accountability. Protests erupted outside military bases, with demonstrators holding signs that read "No child soldiers" and "Protect our future." In Chicago, Lucas Bennett watched these developments with mixed feelings. Someone who valued toughness and resilience, he understood the appeal of indestructible soldiers. But as a father, he couldn't help but worry about what it meant for kids like his son Tyler. When a recruiter showed up at their door one afternoon, Lucas felt a surge of rage, but also fear. "Tyler's only 12, Lucas said firmly, blocking the doorway. "He's not joining anything." The recruiter smiled politely. "Of course, sir. We're just here to provide information for when he's older. It's an incredible opportunity, a chance to make history." Lucas clenched his fists, resisting the urge to slam the door in the man's face. "We'll think about it," he lied, knowing full well he wouldn't let Tyler near the military if he could help it. As tensions rose, so did questions about the morality of exploiting such a gift. Religious leaders weighed in, some condemning the idea of using God-given protection for violence, while others supported it as a means of ensuring peace. Scientists like Alex and Dr. Lewis grappled with guilt, wondering if they should have kept their findings private. Activists called for international treaties to prevent the misuse of indestructibility, but progress was slow. Governments were reluctant to give up such a powerful advantage. In Florida, Emma Parker found herself caught in the middle of the debate. Her fame as a gymnast had drawn the attention of both sponsors and military recruiters. At first, she laughed off the idea of joining the armed forces. She was an athlete, not a soldier. But as offers poured in, promising everything from financial security to global recognition, she started to wonder if she owed it to society to contribute in some way. Wasn't it better to use her abilities for good rather than simply entertaining crowds? Her coach, however, urged caution. "Don't let anyone pressure you into something you're not ready for," he warned during practice one day. "Once you're in, there's no going back." Emma hesitated, torn between excitement and fear. She wanted to believe she could make a difference, but the thought of being controlled by someone else terrified her. For now, she decided to focus on her gymnastics, telling herself she had plenty of time to figure things out later. As weeks turned into months, the military's influence became impossible to ignore. Recruitment posters appeared in schools, community centers, and online platforms targeting young people with promises of adventure and purpose. Some jumped at the chance, eager to prove themselves. Others resisted, wary of being used. Families argued, friends debated, and communities divided over whether this was progress or exploitation. In Washington, lawmakers struggled to find balance. Bills aimed at regulating the use of indestructible individuals stalled in Congress, bogged down by partisan politics and conflicting interests. Meanwhile, protests continued, drawing larger crowds and louder voices. People demanded answers, accountability, and safeguards to ensure that humanity's newfound resilience wasn't turned against itself. For Alex Carter, watching the world change around him was both fascinating and heartbreaking. He had dedicated his life to understanding the natural world, but now it felt like that world was slipping through his fingers. Every test he ran, every discovery he made, seemed to pull humanity further away from the simplicity of science and closer to the complexities of power. Late one night, as he sat alone in the lab, Alex stared at the microscope and whispered to himself, "What have we done?" The question lingered in the air unanswered. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. The age of indestructibility had opened doors that couldn't be closed again. Behind those doors lay challenges no one was prepared to face. Part 1. The small town of Maplewood, Ohio, was known for two things: its quiet streets and the university tucked away on the edge of town. The university wasn't famous or prestigious, but it had a reputation for being dependable, the kind of place where people went to study practical things like engineering, nursing, and biology. It was here, in a dimly lit lab on the third floor of the science building, that something extraordinary began. Alex Carter was the first to notice it. He wasn't a genius or a world-renowned scientist. He was just a graduate student working late nights to finish his thesis. Alex had always been curious about how things worked, especially when it came to living organisms. That curiosity had led him to spend hours peering through microscopes, studying cells under different conditions. But what he saw one evening would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire world. It started with a routine experiment. Alex had been examining samples of human tissue sent over by a local hospital. These samples were supposed to be ordinary, just regular cells taken from patients during routine checkups. But as Alex adjusted the focus on his microscope, something strange caught his eye. The cells looked different. They weren't behaving the way they should have. Instead of breaking down under stress, they seemed to bounce back, almost as if they were made of something stronger than normal. At first, Alex thought it was a mistake. Maybe the sample had been contaminated, or perhaps there was an issue with the equipment. But after running test after test, he realized it wasn't an error. The cells were genuinely more resilient than anything he'd ever seen before. And they weren't just from one person, they were showing up in multiple samples. All collected from people born after 20 to 5. Alex couldn't believe it. He double-checked his data, triple-checked it, and then called his professor, Dr. Karen Lewis, to come take a look. When she arrived, her eyes widened as she stared into the microscope. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, adjusting the lens herself. "Cells shouldn't be able to do this." Word spread quickly through the university. Other researchers came to see for themselves, and soon everyone was talking about it. No one could explain why these cells were so durable. Was it genetic? Environmental? Something else entirely? Whatever the cause, it was clear that something big was happening, and it wasn't limited to Maplewood. Across the country, stories started emerging that backed up what Alex and his colleagues were seeing in the lab. In Michigan, a high school, football player named Jordan Hayes survived a head-on collision during practice without a single bruise. His coach said it was like watching someone get hit by a truck and walk away laughing. In California, a toddler named Mia Roberts fell off a jungle gym and landed on concrete, only to stand up seconds later as though nothing had happened. Her mother posted a video online, and within hours it went viral. People were amazed, terrified. How could this be possible? Some claimed it was a miracle, proof that humanity was evolving into something greater. Others saw it as a warning sign, evidence that something unnatural was at play. Conspiracy theories sprang up overnight: aliens, government experiments, secret programs designed to create superhumans. Everyone had a theory, and no one knew which one to believe. Back in Maplewood, Alex found himself at the center of it all. Reporters showed up at the university, eager to interview him and his team. Scientists from other institutions reached out, wanting to collaborate. Even government officials took notice, sending representatives to ask questions and gather information. For someone who had spent most of his life blending into the background, it was overwhelming. But Alex wasn't the only one affected. People everywhere were starting to question what this meant for the future. Parents marveled at their children's newfound resilience, but worried about what it might mean for their safety. Older generations felt left behind, unsure of how to relate to a world where dangers seemed to have disappeared overnight. And then there were those who didn't trust it at all, convinced that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface. One such skeptic was Lucas Bennett, construction worker from Chicago. Lucas had always prided himself on his toughness. He worked hard, lifted weights, and took pride in being able to handle whatever life threw at him. But now, watching kids run around without a care in the world, completely unafraid of getting hurt, made him feel obsolete. What was the point of being strong if everyone else was indestructible? Lucas wasn't alone in feeling this way. Across the country, people like him struggled to adjust to the new reality. Conversations around dinner tables turned tense as parents argued over whether this was a blessing or a curse. Teachers reported that students were becoming reckless, testing their limits in ways that made adults cringe. Accidents that once would have sent someone to the hospital barely registered anymore. Samantha Lewis, a pediatrician in Boston, noticed the changes firsthand. More and more parents were bringing their children to her office, not because they were injured, but because they wanted answers. Why were their kids suddenly so tough? Was it safe? Would it last? Samantha did her best to reassure them, but deep down, she had her own doubts. She kept detailed records of every case, hoping to find patterns or clues that might explain what was going on. So far, all she knew for sure was that this wasn't something anyone had seen before. As weeks turned into months, the implications of the discovery became harder to ignore. Governments around the world convened emergency meetings to discuss what it meant for national security. Insurance companies panicked, unsure how to price policies for people who couldn't get hurt. Schools revised their safety protocols, wondering if playgrounds even needed guardrails anymore. Every aspect of daily life seemed to be shifting, and no one knew where it would lead. For Alex, the weight of responsibility grew heavier with each passing day. He hadn't set out to change the world. He'd just been doing his job. Now, he found himself wondering if he'd opened Pandora's box. What if this wasn't the end of pain and suffering, but the beginning of something worse? What if there were consequences they hadn't considered yet? Despite his fears, Alex couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. If humans really were becoming indestructible, Maybe it meant they could face the challenges ahead with courage and determination. After all, humanity had survived wars, plagues, and natural disasters. Anything this new development might give them the tools they needed to build a better future. Still, as Alex packed up his things at the end of another long day in the lab, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were only scratching the surface. There was so much they didn't know and so much they still had to learn. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. The world would never be the same again. Part 2, the world was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. News of the indestructible cells spread like wildfire, and soon every corner of society felt its impact. Parents stared at their children with a mix of awe and confusion, unsure whether to celebrate or worry. Older generations watched from the sidelines, feeling as though they were witnessing the start of a new era, one they didn't fully understand and couldn't be part of. In Chicago, Lucas Bennett tried to keep up with his usual routine, but it was getting harder. His job as a construction worker had always been demanding, requiring strength and resilience. Now he found himself questioning what made him special. The younger workers on his crew joked about how easy their lives would have been if they'd been born just a few years later. They laughed when one of them dropped a heavy beam and walked away without even flinching. Lucas forced a smile, but inside he felt uneasy. He wasn't sure where he fit in anymore. At home, things weren't much better. His wife, Lisa, spent hours scrolling through social media, reading stories about kids who survived car crashes, falls, and other accidents without a scratch. "It's like they're superheroes," she said one evening, shaking her head. "Do you think we'll ever get used to this?" Lucas shrugged. "I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't feel normal."
Lisa
sighed. Nothing feels normal anymore. Schools were among the first places to adapt, or at least try to. Teachers struggled to keep students focused as word of their newfound abilities spread. In Michigan, Jordan Hayes became something of a local celebrity after surviving that brutal football collision. His classmates treated him like a legend, daring him to do crazier and crazier stunts. One day, during recess, a group of boys convinced him to jump off the roof of the gymnasium. When he landed unscathed, cheering erupted across the playground. The principal called an emergency assembly the next morning, reminding everyone that just because they couldn't get hurt didn't mean they should act recklessly. But the message barely registered. To the kids, fear was becoming a thing of the past. Parents, however, weren't so quick to embrace the change. Samantha Lewis, the pediatrician in Boston, saw the anxiety firsthand. Her office was busier than ever, filled with worried mothers and fathers seeking answers. Some brought their children in for checkups, hoping to confirm that they were truly indestructible. Others wanted advice on how to discipline kids who thought they were invincible. One afternoon, Samantha met with a mother named Karen, whose 6-year-old son had recently started climbing trees higher than any adult dared to go. "He says he's not scared because nothing can hurt him," Karen explained, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I'm terrified. What if he's wrong? What if something happens?" Samantha listened carefully, jotting down notes as she always did. She assured Karen that the evidence so far suggested her son was safe, but she couldn't promise anything. No one could. The truth was, they were all learning as they went along. Each case added another piece to the puzzle, but the bigger picture remained frustratingly unclear. While families adjusted to the changes, governments scrambled to respond. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers debated how to address the phenomenon. Should there be regulations to prevent reckless behavior? Could insurance companies refuse coverage for people who couldn't get injured? What about athletes? Should sports leagues ban participants who had an unfair advantage? These questions dominated headlines, fueling endless discussions on TV and online. Experts weighed in, offering conflicting opinions. Some argued that humanity's newfound resilience was a gift, proof that evolution was leading them toward a brighter future. Others warned that it could lead to chaos, pointing out that removing fear of consequences might encourage dangerous behavior. Religious leaders added their voices to the conversation, interpreting the discovery in different ways. Some saw it as divine intervention, a sign that God had blessed humanity with protection. Others viewed it as unnatural, a violation of the natural order. Churches held sermons addressing the topic, drawing large crowds eager for guidance. Amid the chaos, conspiracy theories flourished. Websites popped up claiming the government had engineered the mutation as part of a secret experiment. Others suggested aliens were involved, using Earth as a testing ground for their own experiments. Social media amplified these ideas, spreading misinformation faster than fact-checkers could keep up. Derek Collins, a journalist based in New York City, decided to dig deeper. Derek had built a career investigating strange phenomena, and this was the biggest story he'd ever encountered. He started by interviewing scientists, including Alex Carter, who reluctantly agreed to meet him at the university in Maplewood. Alex was cautious during the interview, careful not to say anything that could be misinterpreted. But Derek pressed him, asking if there was any possibility the mutation could have been caused by human interference. Alex hesitated before answering. "We're still looking into it," he admitted. "There are a lot of variables we don't understand yet." That answer only fueled Derek's curiosity. Over the next few weeks, he pored over documents. He interviewed whistleblowers and followed leads that took him across the country. Late one night, while reviewing files obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, he stumbled upon something shocking: classified reports indicating that the U.S. government had known about the mutation. Years before it went public, the revelation hit Derek like a punch to the gut. If true, it meant officials had deliberately kept the information hidden from the public. Why, and what else weren't they telling people? Determined to find out, Derek wrote an expose detailing his findings. When it was published, it sent shockwaves through the nation. Protests erupted almost immediately. Crowds gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read "Truth Now" and "No More Secrets." Protesters demanded transparency, accusing officials of withholding vital information. Tensions escalated when police clashed with demonstrators, resulting in arrests and injuries, ironically. Some of the only injuries reported in weeks back. In Maplewood, Alex watched the protests unfold on TV, guilt gnawing at him. He hadn't intended to spark such outrage, but he couldn't deny that Derek's article raised important questions. Had they moved too quickly? Should they have waited until they understood more before going public? Dr. Karen Lewis, his mentor, shared his concerns. "This is moving faster than we can control," she said during a late-night meeting in the lab. "People are scared, angry, confused. We need to give them answers, and fast." Alex nodded, though he wasn't sure where to start. Every test they ran revealed new complexities, raising more questions than it answered. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces missing. Frustrated but determined, he returned to his microscope, hoping to uncover anything might shed light on the mystery. Meanwhile, ordinary people continued adapting to the new reality in their own ways. In Florida, Emma Parker, a teenage gymnast, began incorporating death-defying stunts into her routines, confident that she wouldn't get hurt. Her performances drew massive crowds, earning her fame and sponsorships. Friends encouraged her to push the limits further, daring her to attempt increasingly dangerous feats. Emma loved the attention, but sometimes late at night she wondered if she was losing sight of why she loved gymnastics in the first place. Across the country, similar stories played out. Young people embraced their indestructibility with enthusiasm, while older generations struggled to keep up. Conversations between parents and children grew tense, with each side struggling to see the other's perspective. Fear and excitement coexisted uneasily, shaping a world caught between the old way of life and whatever came next. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that humanity was standing on the brink of something monumental. Whether it would lead to progress or disaster remained to be seen. For now, everyone from scientists in labs to families in living rooms was holding their breath, waiting to see what the future held. Part 3. The protests grew louder, spreading like wildfire across the country. What had started as scattered demonstrations outside government buildings soon turned into nationwide movements. In cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, thousands of people took to the streets, demanding answers about the mutation that had changed their lives forever. Some carried signs with slogans like, "Why were we kept in the dark?" while others chanted phrases like, "No secrets, no lies." The anger was palpable, And it wasn't just directed at politicians. It was aimed at scientists, corporations, and anyone who might have known the truth but stayed silent. Derek Collins, the journalist whose expose had ignited the firestorm, found himself thrust into the spotlight. Reporters hounded him for interviews. Activists praised him as a hero, and critics accused him of fear-mongering. Despite the attention, Derek remained focused on one goal: uncovering the full story. He knew his article had only scratched the surface, and he was determined to dig deeper. In Maplewood, Ohio, Alex Carter watched the chaos unfold with growing unease. He hadn't intended to create panic, but he couldn't deny that Derek's claims raised valid concerns. Was it possible that someone, whether the government or another organization, had known about the mutation long before it became public knowledge? If so, why had they kept it hidden? These questions haunted him, making it hard to focus on his work in the lab. Every time he looked through the microscope, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Dr. Karen Lewis tried to reassure him, reminding him that science was messy and unpredictable. "We're doing the best we can," she told him during one of their late-night discussions. "You can't blame yourself for something you didn't cause." But Alex wasn't convinced, couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important, some key piece of the puzzle that would explain everything. Determined to find it, he threw himself into his research, running test after test on the mutated cells. Each result brought new questions, and each question deepened the mystery. As the scientific community grappled with the implications of the discovery, society continued to adapt to the new reality. Parents like Lisa Bennett in Chicago tried to keep their children grounded, reminding them that just because they couldn't get hurt didn't mean they should act recklessly. But it was an uphill battle. Kids were naturally curious, and now they had no reason to fear consequences. Accidents that once would have been devastating became opportunities for experimentation. Skateboarders launched themselves off rooftops. Bikers raced down steep hills without helmets, and teenagers dared each other to do increasingly dangerous stunts. Videos of these exploits flooded social media, racking up millions of views and inspiring others to follow suit. Schools were overwhelmed. Teachers struggled to maintain order as students tested their limits in ways that made adults cringe. In Michigan, Jordan Hayes became even more daring after his rooftop jump. Encouraged by his classmates, he began performing stunts that left even seasoned athletes shaking their heads. One day, he climbed to the top of a water tower and jumped off, landing perfectly on his feet. The crowd that had gathered below erupted in cheers, but when school officials heard about it, they suspended him indefinitely. His parents were called in for a meeting, where the principal pleaded with them to rein him in. "He's not just putting himself at risk," the principal said. "He's setting a bad example for everyone else." Jordan's father nodded, though he didn't look convinced. "We'll talk to him," he promised, but privately, he wondered how much control they really had over their son. After all, what could they do to discipline someone who didn't feel pain? Meanwhile, doctors like Samantha Lewis in Boston faced a different kind of challenge. Her office was flooded with patients, or rather, their worried parents. Some came seeking reassurance, while others wanted advice on how to handle their indestructible children. Samantha did her best to help, but she couldn't escape the nagging sense that they were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding. One afternoon, she met with a mother named Rachel, whose 8-year-old daughter had recently started climbing trees higher than any adult dared to go. "She says she's not scared because nothing can hurt her," Rachel explained, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm terrified. What if she's wrong? What if something happens?" Samantha listened carefully, jotting down notes as she always did. She assured Rachel that the evidence so far suggested her daughter was safe, but she couldn't promise anything. No one could. The truth was, they were all learning as they went along. Each case added another piece to the puzzle. But the bigger picture remained frustratingly unclear. Religious groups added fuel to the fire, interpreting the phenomenon in wildly different ways. Some saw it as divine intervention, proof that God had blessed humanity with protection. Others viewed it as unnatural, a violation of the natural order. Churches held sermons addressing the topic, drawing large crowds eager for guidance. In Texas, Pastor Daniel Moore delivered a fiery speech warning his congregation about the dangers of hubris. "This is not a gift from God," he declared. "It is a test of our faith. We must resist the temptation to see ourselves as gods." His words resonated with many, sparking debates both inside and outside religious communities. Social media amplified these discussions, turning them into heated arguments that played out in real time. Memes mocking pastors who opposed the mutation spread alongside posts praising those who embraced it. It seemed everyone had an opinion, and no one agreed. Amid the turmoil, conspiracy theories flourished. Websites claiming the mutation was part of a secret government experiment gained traction, as did those suggesting alien involvement. Late-night talk shows featured guests who swore they'd seen UFOs hovering near areas where the mutation first appeared. Skeptics rolled their eyes, dismissing these claims as nonsense. Plenty of people believed them and acted accordingly. In California, Emma Parker noticed the shift in attitude firsthand. As a gymnast who had embraced her indestructibility, she had become something of a celebrity. Fans flocked to her performances, cheering wildly as she executed death-defying stunts. But lately, she'd started noticing murmurs in the crowd. Some spectators whispered about aliens, while others speculated that she was part of a secret program designed to create superhumans. At first, Emma laughed it off, but as the whispers grew louder, she began to feel uneasy. Who were these people, and why were they so obsessed with her? Back in New York City, Derek Collins continued his investigation, following leads that took him across the country. He interviewed whistleblowers, reviewed classified documents, and pieced together fragments of information that painted a troubling picture. The more he learned, the clearer it became that the government had indeed known about the mutation long before it went public. But why had they kept it hidden? And what else weren't they telling people? Derek's quest for answers led him to a small town in Nevada, where rumors swirled about a secret facility conducting experiments on humans. Locals claimed they'd seen strange vehicles entering and leaving the area at odd hours, and some reported hearing loud noises coming from underground. Intrigued, Derek decided to investigate further. What he found shocked him. Hidden beneath layers of secrecy was a sprawling complex filled with labs, offices, and dormitories. Inside, scientists worked, around the clock, studying samples and running tests. When Derek managed to sneak past security and gather evidence, he realized he'd stumbled upon something monumental, a project so vast and secretive that it made his previous discoveries pale in comparison. Armed with this new information, Derek rushed back to New York to write his next exposé. This time he knew he had to be careful. The stakes were higher than ever, and powerful people would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Derek also knew he couldn't stay silent. But the world deserved to know the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. As he sat down he thought about Alex Carter and the other scientists working tirelessly to understand the mutation. He thought about families struggling to adapt, teenagers pushing boundaries, and protesters demanding answers. Most of all, he thought about the future shaped by choices being made right now. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Part 4. The curiosity about human indestructibility reached new heights as people began testing the limits of their newfound abilities. What started as harmless experiments quickly turned into reckless stunts, pushing boundaries that no one had dared to cross before. Social media became a breeding ground for videos showcasing these acts. Teenagers and young adults eager to prove they were truly invincible. In California, Emma Parker became a household name. Her gymnastics routines, already thrilling, took on an entirely new dimension when she added death-defying leaps and flips. During one performance, she launched herself off a platform 20 feet high, twisting in midair before landing perfectly on her feet. The crowd went wild, cheering and chanting her name. Videos of the stunt went viral, earning millions of views within hours. Friends and fans begged her to go even bigger, daring her to attempt more dangerous feats. Emma loved the attention, but sometimes felt uneasy. Late at night, lying in bed, she wondered if she was losing sight of why she loved gymnastics. In the first place, was it still about the art and skill, or had it become something else, a way to show off? She pushed the thought aside, telling herself she was just having fun. After all, what was the harm in trying something new when nothing could hurt her? Across the country, similar stories played out. In Texas, Ryan Dawson, a college football player, decided to test his limits during practice. He stood in front of a speeding, tackling sled, refusing to budge as it crashed into him. The impact sent shockwaves through the field, but Ryan didn't even flinch. His teammates stared in disbelief, then erupted into cheers. "You're unstoppable," one of them shouted, slapping him on the back. Ryan grinned, feeling invincible. But not everyone was impressed. Coaches and trainers grew concerned as athletes pushed themselves harder and harder, ignoring basic safety protocols. In Michigan, Jordan Hayes continued performing stunts that left adults shaking their heads. After being suspended from school for jumping off the water tower, he moved his antics to local parks, climbing trees and rooftops to entertain growing crowds. Parents watched nervously as their kids mimicked his moves, convinced they were just as indestructible as he was. Schools struggled to keep up. Teachers pleaded with students to focus on their studies, but it was hard to compete with the excitement of living without fear. Accidents that once would have sent someone to the hospital barely registered anymore. Skateboarders launched themselves off ramps higher than ever before. Bikers raced down steep hills without helmets, and daredevils performed tricks that made seasoned professionals cringe. Videos of these exploits flooded social media, inspiring others to follow suit. Parents like Lisa Bennett in Chicago tried to rein in their children, but it was an uphill battle. Her son Tyler had recently started riding his bike without brakes, claiming he didn't need them. "It's fine, Mom," he said when she confronted him. "I can't get hurt, remember?" Lisa sighed, unsure how to respond. She wanted to protect him, but how could she argue against something that seemed impossible to disprove? Doctors like Samantha Lewis in Boston faced a different kind of challenge. Her office was flooded with worried parents seeking advice on how to handle their indestructible children. Some came looking for reassurance, while others wanted strategies to discipline kids who didn't feel pain. Samantha did her best to help, but she couldn't escape the nagging sense that they were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding. One afternoon, she met with a mother named Karen, whose 6-year-old son had recently started climbing trees higher than any adult dared to go. "He says he's not scared because nothing can hurt him," Karen explained, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm terrified. What if he's wrong? What if something happens?" Samantha listened carefully, jotting down notes as she always did. She assured Karen that the evidence so far suggested her son was safe, but she couldn't promise anything. No one could. The truth was, they were all learning as they went along. Each case added another piece to the puzzle, but the bigger picture remained frustratingly unclear. While families adapted or struggled to adapt to the new reality, governments scrambled to respond. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers debated how to address the phenomenon. Should there be regulations to prevent reckless behavior? Could insurance companies refuse coverage for people who couldn't get injured? What about athletes? Should sports leagues ban participants who had an unfair advantage? These questions dominated headlines, fueling endless discussions on TV and online. Experts weighed in, offering conflicting opinions. Some argued that humanity's newfound resilience was a gift, proof that evolution was leading them toward a brighter future. Others warned that it could lead to chaos, pointing out that removing fear of consequences might encourage dangerous behavior. Religious leaders added their voices to the conversation, interpreting the discovery in different ways. Some saw it as divine intervention, a sign that God had blessed humanity with protection. Others viewed it as unnatural, a violation of the natural order. Churches held sermons addressing the topic, drawing large crowds eager for guidance. Amid the chaos, conspiracy theories flourished. Websites claiming the mutation was part of a secret government experiment gained traction, as did those suggesting alien involvement. Late-night talk shows featured guests who swore they'd seen UFOs hovering near areas where the mutation first appeared. Skeptics rolled their eyes, dismissing these claims as nonsense. But plenty of people believed the man acted accordingly. In Nevada, Derek Collins continued his investigation, following leads that took him deeper into the mystery.
Yes.
About the secret facility in the desert had sparked outrage, prompting calls for transparency and accountability. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, demanding answers about the experiments conducted there. Lawmakers convened emergency meetings to discuss next steps, but progress was slow. Powerful people had too much to lose, and they weren't ready to give up their secrets. Back in Maplewood, Ohio, Alex Carter and Dr. Karen Lewis worked tirelessly. In the lab, hoping to uncover the source of the mutation, every test brought new questions, and every question deepened the mystery. They studied environmental factors, genetic markers, and potential triggers, but nothing provided a clear explanation. Frustrated but determined, Alex returned to his microscope night after night, searching for clues as days turned into weeks. Society continued to adjust to the new reality. Some embraced it wholeheartedly, seeing it as an opportunity to push boundaries and explore unknown possibilities. Others approached it cautiously, wary of unforeseen consequences. Conversations between generations grew tense, with each side struggling to see the other's perspective. Fear and excitement coexisted uneasily, shaping a world caught between the old way of life and whatever came next. For now, everyone from scientists in labs to families in living rooms was holding their breath, waiting to see what the future held. Whatever happened, one thing was certain: humanity was standing on the brink of something monumental. Whether it led to progress or disaster remained to be seen. But, for better or worse, the age of indestructibility had begun. Part 6: The global implications of humanity's newfound indestructibility began to unfold as nations around the world took notice. What had started as a phenomenon limited to the United States quickly became an international issue, sparking debates, alliances, and rivalries on a scale never seen before. Governments scrambled to understand what this meant for their citizens, their economies, and their security. The discovery wasn't just changing lives, it was reshaping the geopolitical landscape. In China, leaders saw opportunity. Scientists in Beijing confirmed that Chinese citizens born after 2025 exhibited the same resilience as those in the US, though they were careful not to call it indestructibility. Instead, officials framed it as a natural evolution, proof that China was leading the way into a brighter future. State media celebrated stories of young workers who could perform dangerous tasks without fear of injury, emphasizing how this would boost productivity and innovation. Factories began integrating these individuals into higher-risk jobs, from construction sites to mining operations, reducing the need for expensive safety measures. But not everyone was thrilled. Labor unions voiced concerns about exploitation, arguing that indestructible workers weren't immune to exhaustion or stress. Parents worried about their children being pushed too hard, forced into roles they hadn't chosen. Despite these objections, the government pressed forward, announcing plans to create entire industries built around the capabilities of the new generation. It was clear that China intended to capitalize on this development, positioning itself as a global leader in the age of resilience. Russia, meanwhile, approached the situation with caution. Officials acknowledged the existence of the mutation, but downplayed its significance, insisting that Russian citizens were already strong enough without needing special abilities. Behind closed doors, however, military strategists worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures against indestructible enemies. Rumors spread of secret programs aimed at creating weapons capable of harming even the toughest targets. Some suggested that Russia might attempt to suppress the mutation altogether, using chemical or biological means to neutralize it. These whispers fueled paranoia, both domestically and abroad. Back in the United States, Natalie Hughes, a diplomat tasked with negotiating international treaties, found herself overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. Her job had always been challenging, but now it felt nearly impossible. Every meeting she attended turned into a battle of wills, with each nation trying to outmaneuver the others. Allies became adversaries overnight. Long-standing partnerships began to crumble under the weight of mistrust. One particularly tense negotiation took place in Geneva, where representatives from over 50 countries gathered to discuss the implications of indestructibility. The conference room buzzed with tension as delegates argued over everything from trade agreements to military regulations. China demanded exemptions for its workforce policies, while Russia insisted on sharing intelligence about potential threats. Smaller nations pleaded for guidance, unsure how to adapt to a world where power dynamics had shifted so dramatically. Natalie spent hours drafting proposals and mediating disputes. She knew that failure to reach an agreement could lead to disaster and arms race, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Yet progress was agonizingly slow. Every compromise seemed to spark new disagreements, and every solution raised fresh questions. During one heated session, a delegate from India stood up and addressed the room. "We cannot ignore the ethical implications of this," he said, his voice firm. "If we allow ourselves to exploit these abilities for profit or power, we risk losing our humanity. This is not just a scientific breakthrough, it is a moral test." His words resonated with some, but others dismissed them as naive. A representative from France countered, "Ethics are important, yes, but so is survival. If we do not prepare ourselves for the challenges ahead, we may find ourselves left behind." The debate raged on, with no clear resolution in sight. Natalie left the conference exhausted, wondering if diplomacy could ever bridge such deep divides. As she walked through the streets of Geneva that evening, she thought about her own family, her teenage daughter, Emily, who had recently started experimenting with her indestructibility by climbing trees and riding her bike recklessly. Would Emily grow up in a world defined by cooperation, or would she face constant conflict? Natalie didn't have the answers, but she vowed to keep fighting for peace, no matter how difficult it became. Meanwhile, ordinary people continued to grapple with the changes in their daily lives. In Florida, Emma Parker received an invitation to attend a prestigious gymnastics academy in Europe, where coaches hoped to harness her abilities for competitive advantage. The offer was tempting, but Emma hesitated, remembering her coach's warning about letting others control her life. She confided in her mother, who listened quietly before offering advice. "You're still young," her mother said gently. "Don't have to make decisions based on what other people want. Think about what makes you happy, not what makes them happy." Emma nodded, grateful for the reminder. Still, the pressure mounted as sponsors and recruiters flooded her inbox with offers. Each one promised fame, fortune, or purpose, but none guaranteed freedom. For now, Emma decided to stay focused on her training, telling herself she had time to figure things out later. In Texas, Ryan Dawson faced similar pressures. Military recruiters continued to pursue him, sending letters and making personal visits to his home. His father tried to shield him from their influence, but Ryan couldn't help feeling torn. Part of him wanted to serve his country, to use his abilities for something meaningful. Another part feared losing himself in the process. He talked to his friends about it, hoping for clarity, but their opinions only added to his confusion. "I'd do it in a heartbeat," said one friend, a fellow football player named Jake. "Imagine being part of something bigger than yourself. You'd be a hero." "Or a pawn," countered another friend. Sarah, who had watched her older brother join the military, only to regret it. "They'll use you until there's nothing left." Ryan didn't know whom to believe. He spent hours lying awake at night, weighing the pros and cons. Eventually, he decided to visit a local veterans group, hoping to gain insight from those who had served. The veterans welcomed him warmly, sharing stories of camaraderie and sacrifice. They also warned him about the realities of military life, the danger, and the difficulty of leaving behind civilian freedoms. "It's not all glory," one veteran told him candidly. "Make sure you know what you're getting into before you sign anything." Ryan thanked them for their honesty, though he still felt uncertain. He appreciated their perspective, but it didn't make his decision any easier. For now, he chose to focus on finishing his senior year of high school, telling himself he had plenty of time to decide. As tensions between nations escalated, conspiracy theories gained traction. Websites claimed that the mutation was part of a global plot orchestrated by shadowy organizations seeking to reshape society. Others suggested that aliens were behind it, using Earth as a testing ground for their experiments. Social media amplified These ideas spreading misinformation faster than fact-checkers could keep up in New York City. Derek Collins continued his investigation, following leads that took him across continents. He uncovered evidence suggesting that multiple governments had known about the mutation years before it went public, collaborating or competing to harness its potential. The more he learned, the clearer it became that the truth was far more complicated than anyone realized. Derek's exposes sparked outrage, prompting calls for transparency and accountability. Protesters gathered outside embassies and government buildings, demanding answers about secret experiments and classified programs. Lawmakers convened emergency meetings to address growing unrest, but progress remained elusive. Powerful people had too much to lose, and they weren't ready to give up their secrets. Back in Ohio, Alex Carter and Dr. Karen Lewis worked tirelessly in the lab, hoping to uncover the source of the mutation. Every test brought new questions, and every question deepened the mystery. They studied environmental factors, genetic markers, and potential triggers, but nothing provided a clear explanation. Frustrated but determined, Alex returned to his microscope, night after night, searching for clues as days turned into weeks. Society continued to adjust to the new reality. Some embraced it wholeheartedly, seeing it as an opportunity to push boundaries and explore unknown possibilities. Others approached it cautiously, wary of unforeseen consequences. Conversations between generations grew tense, with each side struggling to see the other's perspective. Fear and excitement coexisted uneasily, shaping a world caught between the old way of life and whatever came next. For now, everyone from scientists in labs to families in living rooms was holding their breath, waiting to see what the future held. Whatever happened, one thing was certain: humanity was standing on the brink of something monumental. Whether it led to progress or disaster remained to be seen. But for better or worse, the age of indestructibility had begun.